Okay, today we've got a 10-gallon freshwater tank here that needs a water change on it. The tank's gotten pretty gunky. You can see the water's a little bit yellow and we have algae all over the canopy. So we'll just go step by step what you need to do to clean a small freshwater aquarium like this. And the first thing we'll do is we'll cut off all the power to everything except for the light hood. The heater can burn up if you drain the water too low, and it's also bad for the filter if you lose suction on the filter. So we'll cut everything off except for the light hood, and then we'll get started. Okay, I've got everything together now. I've cut off all the power to everything except for the light hood, and I have some buckets that I'm going to use to drain the water into here in a few minutes. And the buckets are also useful if you need to take out decorations or things and place those in the buckets. And I'm also just using a little blue filter pad you can get at the fish store to wipe the glass and to wipe off the canopy and so forth. So the first thing we'll do is let's get this light hood off of here and take a look at this canopy. Okay, so you can see this has got a lot of algae and stuff growing on here. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just take this into the sink and get this cleaned up, and then we'll be ready to start on the tank. Okay, so now we've got the canopy cleaned up, and I like to just leave that off while you service the tank. You have to be careful with your light. You don't want that to fall in the water and get shocked. But if you position that kind of out of the way where you still get some light, that can help you do a better job. The next thing I like to do is just let's get all these decorations and things out of the way so we can have good access to clean the inside of the glass and also to vacuum the gravel. You'll have a lot of dead spots under these decorations where a lot of debris will accumulate, and it's usually best just to get all this stuff out of the way. This kind of detached here. Okay, so we're removing all these decorations, and that will give us good access to clean the inside of the aquarium. I'll just throw all these into a little bucket off to the side. If anything needs to be cleaned, like these plastic plants, or any of the decorations, really, you can use a little bit of Clorox on those if you need to, but make sure you rinse it carefully and thoroughly before you put them back in there, because the chlorine is detrimental to the fish. Okay, so we're cleaning the inside of the glass. I like to clean the inside of the glass first before I vacuum, because that way all the things that get stirred up will settle down to the bottom. If there's any algae that you knock off the walls and so forth, that will settle on the bottom of the tank, and when you get ready to vacuum, you can get a lot of that stuff out of there. If you wipe the glass after you vacuum, sometimes you'll leave debris on the gravel that you can't get because you've already done your water change. So I just sort of work around the entire inside of the glass with the pad here. Okay, so I've just about finished wiping out the inside of the tank here. And air hoses and things like that, you can just give them a quick once over with the pad also. Heater, things like that. They'll all get slime and algae and things on there, so just work that with the pad and it'll clean right up. And that should pretty much do it for that. Now what I'll do is I'll let this settle for just a few minutes so all this debris will settle back down on the bottom of the aquarium, and then we'll be ready to vacuum the bottom. So now the debris is settled all back down to the bottom of the aquarium, and I have my vacuum here ready to vacuum the bottom. On a small tank, you usually have to take out a pretty good portion of the water, maybe half or just over a half. I wouldn't do too much more than that, just enough to make sure you get most of the debris out of the gravel. And I just use a 5-gallon, on a small tank like this, I use a 5-gallon bucket with a siphon hose. You can get these at the fish store. Now the problem with these small tanks, you'll run out of water pretty quickly if you don't regulate the flow. Now this is a pretty big siphon, so what I'll do is I'll crimp this hose slightly with my hand to slow the water flow down so that the water doesn't drain too quickly. So I'm able to get around and vacuum a good portion of the gravel. The other thing is, you don't want to change too much water, because that's the biggest mistake people make. They change too much water and then they shock the fish. It changes the pH, it changes the temperature somewhat, and so I like to shoot for about half the water, maybe just over half on a really dirty tank. It's better to come back and clean the tank again in a few days rather than to try to do too much in one day. If you do too much, if it's too big of a change, you can stress the fish, and that's where people run into big problems with their tanks. So anyway, we'll start vacuuming here. Just this is a simple way to start a siphon. You just angle it slightly upward and fill it up. Then when you raise it out of the water will begin to drain. Then drop it right back down in the tank, and it'll start the siphon process. Some siphons have a little flapper in there where you can just raise it up and down, and it will start the siphon that way. But I don't like the ones with the flappers, because debris can get caught in that flapper. They clog up sort of easily. So I prefer just to use the old sort with no flapper in there. And they're easy to start. This is just angle it up, raise it, it'll start to drain, drop it right back down. And you can completely stop the flow by crimping it until you're ready to go to the first spot. And then I'm going to go to each spot, kind of rotate around the tank one little spot at a time, and you can see it's pulling water out of there and pulling that debris out of the gravel along with it. It's important to get that debris out of the gravel. There's leftover food and fish waste and things like that in the gravel, and that will deteriorate your water quality. It keeps the pH low, it keeps your nitrates high. So that's the main purpose of vacuuming the gravel, is to try to get rid of all the debris that's in there. Some people just change the water on the tank, which is good, but it has a better effect on your tank if you actually pull all the debris out of the bottom, or at least as much as you can. I'm looking in my bucket down here. I can tell that I'm getting a lot of debris because the water in the bucket's actually sort of tea colored, and that's from all this waste that I'm pulling out of the tank. Now I've just about vacuumed the entire bottom. You can see I'm about halfway down here, taking about half of the water out of the tank, and that's probably about as good as we can get in one session. Okay, so now we've vacuumed the tank, we've cleaned the inside of the glass. Now we need to service our little filter we have here. This one just uses a little power filter with a replaceable cartridge, and you can see this cartridge it's pretty dirty, so I'll discard this old cartridge here and we'll put a new cartridge in. Most of these have activated carbon in the cartridge, so you want to rinse that off before you put it in the tank. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll just actually dip that in the water that I just pulled out of the tank, and that'll suffice to clean it up enough to put it in there. And so we replace our little filter, drop that back into the filter box. Another thing that will happen is when you drain the tank, sometimes your power filter will not have enough water in it to reprime when you restart the tank. So when I'm filling the tank, I'll not only fill up the tank to the bottom of the rim, but I'll also top off the power filter, so when I plug everything back in, it'll start right back up with no problem. If there's no water in there, it won't start because there'll be an air pocket in there and it doesn't have enough water inside to reprime. So let's get the water ready to refill the tank. Okay, so I've topped off the filter and I've topped off the tank most of the way. Let's top off the tank the rest of the way. Now I just used tap water, but I made sure it was close to the same temperature as the water in the tank. That's really important. You don't want to shock the fish. And you treat that with a one-step chlorine ammonia remover. And I'll just fill that up there right to the bottom of the line. Fill it up to the bottom of the rim there. And that's pretty much it. Now we're going to put the hood and the light back on, and we'll turn the filters back on, and that should do it for this water change. Okay, so everything's back together now, and this will clear up, you know, in half an hour, maybe an hour. The filter will pick up the debris that's left floating in the water there. And so I'll usually just go around with a towel, get any residual water that's left over, and make sure your filters and everything are running okay. And that's pretty much it for the water change. We took about half the water down, took all the decorations out, wiped it down, took about half the water down, changed the cartridge, top it back off with water about the same temperature that's been treated for chlorine. And again, if your decorations have a lot of algae on there, you can soak them in Clorox and water solution and just rinse them real thoroughly before you put them back in there. I have a little bit of algae on the decorations here, but not enough to really warrant having to bleach everything. So it took me about 15 minutes to do the whole process. So, and I filmed the whole thing, so it's a simple process, and your tank will do a lot better. Most tanks I do this probably once a month, twice a month. It just depends on how much you feed and how much how much bioload the tank has, how many fish, and so forth. But usually at least once a month. Some people let their tank go for months and months and months without changing any water, and things can get really bad when you do that. So do a water change on it about once a month, and your fish will be happy and your tank will look better. Thank you.